Hello, everyone.
Good
Welcome.
day.
Hi.
Hey, Emily.
Let's get
Do you pronounce it Emily,
moving.
like Emily? Yes.
Emelie.
Emily.
Emily doesn't matter. I get called Emile. I don't know, maybe it's because I live in Texas.
We'll give you a new name by the time this call is done.
That's fine. That's fine. I've gone by many names. Hey, you, mama, 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 mama. That one's a popular one.
Yes, that's scene from Family Guy. Do you know the one I'm referring to?
Yeah, mom,
Yes,
mom,
mom.
mom, mom.
Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to Coaches Connect. You
Woohoo!
probably know who I am. I'm Kate. This is a weekly coaching call for our precision nutrition community. And today I am joined by the lovely Emelie of Pasta. How do you say it? Queso? Queso?
Queso.
Queso. Pasta. Say it again. Pasta.
Queso.
Queso.
Like queso.
Pasta. Queso. So Emelie is, I had to write that down, a comedic copy coach. We're going to start by telling us what on earth that is,
Okay.
because does anyone know? I did not know that that job exists until I came across Emelie, which is my favorite thing ever, right? Like when you come across someone and it's like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but here it is. This person made it into a thing and it's a thing now.
A comedic, what did you say?
Comedic copy coach.
Oh, cool.
Tell us what
Oh.
it is.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with copywriters, all sorts of copywriters, like they'll write all the things for you. Specifically, I write sales copy, but I stopped actually writing copy for people a while back and started coaching people through writing their own copy because it's just so expensive to hire a copywriter to write all the things. And you already know so much about your business that it's like, I can write the things, I just need some guidance. So, what I've found is that that was just a really great way to serve folks. So, I started coaching copywriting. But then specifically, I started teaching people how to introduce humor into their copy because it just takes really well. It's a great partner to sales. So yeah, that's kind of how it came to be. So
I love the shift because I hope you all heard the shift from doing the thing to
mhm.
helping people do the thing, which is a definition of coaching, right? Like went from copywriting for people to let me show you how to do this. And Emelie, one of my favorite things that I've seen you say and talk about is that you are the best person to write
Mhm.
your own copy. Like if you have been, like you are the person who knows your brand, your services, your voice the best. Like you're truly the best person to do
Mhm.
this. So with a bit of guidance from Emelie,
You can knock it out of the park.
out of the park.
Yeah,
So
that's why.
go ahead.
No,
Mhm.
no. Oh, I was just saying that's why too, when you do hire a copywriter, it's so funny because they spend so much time trying to get in your head and ask you all these questions because they're trying to essentially almost like embody who you are and your people and your voice and all that. They're trying to get to all that stuff that only you have access to. So it's kind of like, why don't we just kind of flip it around instead of me trying to become you? Why don't I just teach you what I know since you already are you? So I think it's just it's been a really empowering, for lack of better words, switch for a lot of business owners.
Yeah, I love that. So we'll use the chat or feel free to unmute throughout the call if you have questions coming up, and I'll be keeping my eye on the chat. But let's start with like why funny? Like I started talking about that a little bit, introducing Emelie in the group, right? Because we have all heard the expression sex sells, right? I just find that like sex, at least for me, has been harder to find to like fold into my services
So do
taste.
poop jokes. So do poop jokes.
Joke
We got
sells.
it.
So like funny sells, right? Like and funny just might be somewhat easier for most of us to
Michelle love talking poop.
interpret, right? So how did you come up like humor? I think you have a little bit of background in stand up.
Oh, oh man, I wasn't expecting that question. Well, my background actually isn't like stand up. I've just always been like that funny kid or that funny, you know what I mean? I mean, we had someone comment like their inner 12-year-old. I've always just kind of led with my inner 12-year-old as well. And right now, like we see a lot of people trying to use, and you've probably seen it where people are like, how spicy can I be? Like, how can I be have a hot take, or what can I say that's like so different from everyone else? And people are just really pushing that right now, and everything's very serious and intense. And especially when you're selling something or an experience or transformation that's really intense or really hard for people, bringing in humor is a great way to lighten things up. You know, if there's a really common misunderstanding that humor could like take away from how serious your project is, or in this case, like health and fitness is so important, it's so crucial, but we can get really like wrapped up in that part of it, and bringing in humor and levity can really lighten the experience, make it more approachable, build those relationships, all that sort of stuff.
It can be such a relief, I think, when we bring levity into the
Hmm.
really hard experiences and conversations. Like, because I do find like it's such a human thing where
Hmm.
everything is yes and, right? Like
Yes.
everything is horrible, but also amusing. Like I will never get tired of it, where the fact that there's going to be those tiny, tiny, really funny moments in even the saddest of the experiences, and to actually
Hmm.
acknowledge it, I think can be really just relieving for the receiving party as well.
Yeah, that's why people use like humor as like a coping mechanism, or like it's really great for healing. And I think that's kind of like some people could take it a little too far on both sides of it, where it's completely gone, or it's, you know, it's become your whole everything so you don't feel things. But yeah, I love that. And that's why I talk a lot about writing copy. Like you probably have come across people who are like, when it comes to your brand, make sure you're clear, clear, clear. Um, and I'm always like, why not and? Why can't we be clear and clever? And we can. So I love that you brought up that and. And yes, Tony, that's a really good one. I reference a lot of their studies in my content. I love that you're
Oh, I
familiar with
love
them.
it. A great reco. I am writing this one down. Thanks, Tony. Thanks
Yeah,
for
I
bringing
actually have it right here.
that. Beautiful. Okay. Okay, so pop in your questions as they come up, thoughts, anything you want to share, anything you want Emelie to talk to. But Emelie, I'm actually curious just from the business perspective.
Hmm.
I find that when we talk about coaching, and folks
Hmm.
here that are joining us today for the most part would be health coaches, nutrition coaches, personal trainers, gym owners, strength coaches, like the health and fitness gamut, sleep and recovery, right? Like that's our people here.
Hmm.
And we often talk about how, on one hand, coaching is a luxury good, it's a luxury
Hmm.
service. And even with that, we sometimes have trouble connecting the dots. Like it's not that common, I think, for people to wake up and say, I'm going to hire a nutrition coach today, right? Like that's
Hmm.
not really how we think. Like we might wake up and say to ourselves, "Oh, I really have to get my shit together when it comes to food," right? Like that may be more of how we think. So
Hmm.
connecting like what people want and what we provide can
Hmm.
be not that easy. And I imagine no one wakes up and says, you know what I really need? I need a comedic copy coach.
Yes. No one goes, that sounds great.
How do
Yeah.
you how do you bridge that gap? Like how, because I imagine what you need to do, you actually need to educate the new eyes in terms of what it is you even do for them to realize that they need you.
Hmm. Yeah, we could probably relate in so many ways, because I imagine that you speak a lot too. And Tony's got a good questions I'd love to address too. But it's probably similar to where you spend a lot of time educating and sharing, right? But that's just like basic marketing. But when it comes to what you're saying, you know, no one wakes up and goes, I need a comedic copy coach, or I really want to hire like a coach to help me with my health or my fitness. That comes down to messaging. So I really like to explain to people that when it comes to writing any sort of copy, you've kind of got these three buckets. And they're almost like phases or layers of when you're actually writing content. So first is your messaging, and your messaging is really going to speak to like what you just said. That helps sort of bridge the gap. There's these little overarching concepts of things you need to touch on, things you need to address in order to make the sale, in order what you need to do in order to speak to people and make them actually wake up and realize they do need to hire you. And so that all lays in your messaging. So that's completely separate from the humor, all of that sort of stuff. So you have your messaging as like your first layer, your first step, the first thing you got to figure out. And a lot of those, when you figure those out, it's not cute, sexy. It's not like, oh, I could write this verbatim and it's going to sound awesome. This is an awesome headline. Like usually it's more data centric. And then after that, you layer on brand voice. And brand voice is like how you deliver it. And that's where humor lives. So humor is just sort of like a filter and the vehicle of those things. So whenever you speak to how do you, I guess, bridge that gap between what we do similarly versus what people want, that's where you really have to figure out what their desire is. And stop me if I'm like going on too much. I just want to make sure I have some context. But with desire, what I typically have my clients do is let's make a giant list of all the things that they want. Because like, sure, it's like, oh, I'd love to lose this amount of weight, or I'd love to sleep more than this hours of the night, or I'd love to not be bloated all the time, or whatever it is. Like, just make a giant list of all those desires. And your job then is to find that red thread, that underlying desire. Like, okay, it all boils down to this one thing. And if I can fix that one thing, everything else sort of resolves itself. And that's what we speak to. And whenever you consistently use your content or your copy to speak to that, that's when people start to realize this is the person that I need to hire. This is the person I need in my life.
I would love for folks that are tuning in live, or if you're watching on replay, to just pause and consider what are some of the desires that they're hearing from their clients. Like, what do you hear often from people that come knocking on your door, or who your, ideal client is? Like they say, I just want what is it, right? And I'll actually ask Emelie maybe to speak to her clients as well. I'm thinking of the clients that kind of end up hiring me, and it's this like very weird desire
Mhm.
oftentimes, like where I hear coaches say, uh, I just feel so overwhelmed and I want to know exactly what I'm doing next. I want to know where
Mhm.
my focus is. I want to wake up, like I call it the random Tuesday problem. I want to wake up on a random Tuesday and know exactly what I need to do in order for my business to move forward, for my health to be on point, for me to start moving towards my goals. So it's really that, like, I want to feel more clear. I want to feel less hazy. And I'm a little bit of a weird one because I find that my clients' desires tend to be very ambiguous by definition, which is part
Yeah.
of the overwhelm, right? And I've
Yeah.
always said, like, ambiguous goals don't scare me. That's where my superpower is. It's going from ambiguous to specific. And if your goal is to, I just want to feel less overwhelmed, it's like, cool, we can work with that. So pop some of the things that all of you are hearing or anticipating in your clients. What are they saying? I want what? And Emelie, what are your people saying to you?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what people say here, but I will say a lot of these things that I'm probably going to see being listed out are usually symptoms of that one underlying. So one thing I get is like, I don't um I don't know what to write about, or um, I'm not sure if what I'm writing is going to work. How do I come up with ideas? How do I make sure it sounds like me? A big thing I hear is, how do I take my offline self and put it online? Because some many people tell me, man, I could get on a call with a client and like I'll sell them like that. But how do I translate that into written word? So we're seeing here in the comments, weight loss, energy, increased strength. Just want to look how I did in my 20s, some skinny, shredded, healthy meals. Yeah, all of these sort of things. So whenever you start to list these things out, what I like to do is ask yourself, you're gonna sound like a toddler. Why? Why? Why does that matter? Why do they want that? So even just this like feel good about my body. Lisa, it's like, why do they want to feel good about their body? Why does that even matter? Or if you're talking about like feel confident in my choices, my lifestyle, it's like, why does it matter that you live a confident life? And you're kind of gonna get to a point where you're like, like I can't get it down any further. And that's kind of where you're going to start finding that underlying. Um, so yeah, like even Tony, like his client is supposed to get like skinny or shredded. Why does that matter? Is it like a perception thing? Is it an ability? Is it how they feel? Does it reflect some sort of values that they have on the inside, on the outside? Um, that's where you sort of start digging deeper. What are your thoughts, Kate?
Yeah, I like it. And I think like what you're also getting at is the, you know, that tool that we're most of us very familiar with, like the five whys, right? Like where we help
Yeah.
our clients, like people here, that I always find these calls to be very meta because we are coaches talk about coaching clients, right? There's like
Yep.
layer of coaching. So we use that with our clients, like, oh, you want to lose weight. Why do you want to lose weight? And why is that important? Why is
Hmm.
that important? But at the same time, the
It's so hard to do it for yourself.
I was gonna say our own medicine, God, it tastes so bitter and we don't want to drink it.
Hmm.
And sometimes I like apologize to my clients who are coaches. I'm like, listen, I know you're gonna hate me. Like, we're just gonna do the five whys thing, okay? Like, just work with me here. I know you know this. So
Yes.
take the delve into the cold water together. I do want to chat through Sheriff's question here. How important is it to speak directly to one specific target audience or niche?
Oof.
I find it very challenging to pick just one niche and create all
Mhm.
content speaking to them. Like, Emelie, I love this question for you because I feel like your audience, correct me, this is my perception. Your audience is anyone
Wrong. Just kidding.
who writes copy, anyone who needs copy is potentially
Hmm.
your audience.
Yes and no. So okay, so I guess well, like where do I start on this? I guess I would really like to know as well, since you asked this question, what are those target audiences or niches that you're like, I'm having a hard time choosing between. I'm really curious. Because what I really like to say is, I know some people are really big on audience. It's like, okay, her name is Margaret. She's in her 20s and she drinks iced lattes only if it's above 74 degrees on Wednesdays. And it's kind of like, oh my God. And it's just like, it's too much. And I like I rein it in way back. Like literally in my messaging, mine says like creative entrepreneurs. Like it doesn't say, it's not service providers. It's not like, it's creative entrepreneurs. And the reason why I say like creative is like, and then entrepreneurs, like I don't work with like big businesses, like really small teams or like solopreneurs. But the creative part is folks who they want to write their own copy. That's kind of how I identify that because it's their business, there is their baby. I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to that. But when it comes down to the niching, and I should probably scroll down on the comments to see if you answered. When it comes down to the niching aspect though, I actually encourage people, instead of niching down to like a very specific person or a persona that you've mapped out, is really to niche down through your point of view. So, for instance, whenever I write things, I always have my little messaging cheat sheet that I write at the top of everything I write. And that sort of answers a question that Tony asked earlier that we could circle back to. But one thing that I do is I make sure that I lean in really hard on my perspective, my point of view. And so, like Kate said, one thing I talk about is that you're the best person to write your own copy. I also talk about the fact that you can be clear and clever. Picking just clear over clever, I think it's lazy. Like I talk to those things and people weed themselves out. So people who don't want to write their own copy, they're gone. People who are like, no, you have to be, I don't want anything to do with being clever or whatever, they weed themselves out. So I usually recommend getting an idea of who you're talking to, of course, but really lean into niching into your point of view.
Yeah, and Emelie, what the other thing I'm thinking of that, and I've said this before, where I think our niche doesn't need to be as specific as we think,
Yeah.
because people are going to self-select, right? So if
Yes.
people are
Yeah.
going to come to you and they say, well, actually, I want you to write my copy,
Hmm.
you're going to say, well, I don't, that's not really what I do. And at the same time, you have, you've referred to poop jokes like 2 minutes into this call, right? Like, so there's
Yeah.
also something to be said about that.
Personality fits. Personality fits.
Personality fit. I never have to specify that I work with health and wellness professionals who appreciate sarcasm. I never have to say that. because they will self-select. And if you don't appreciate sarcasm, you will probably be running far, far away from me anyway, or just not get, right? Like my writing and how I show up. So that just self-selects on its own. It just happens naturally. Like that
Yes.
personality fit layered on top. And
Hmm.
I think that's where I really think when we talk like, oh, the market is so saturated. There are all these copywriting coaches and there are all these like coaches. And it's true. There are many people out there, but there's not a lot of copywriting coaches who do exactly what Emelie does. I don't know anyone
Hmm.
else, right? Like,
Yeah,
so
and I'm sure y'all are you're the same way too, because it's like you said, it's layered. I feel like when you're niching, you're layering things on. So it's sort of like, okay, what are you actually teaching, and what are you coaching, I should say? Like, say that you lean into a specific like type of a way of eating or a way of doing fitness, whatever. Like that adds a layer. That adds a layer onto your point of view. It just like it slowly layers itself. um and you sort of end up niching through that. I think we overthink it because it's like, oh, I've got to spend X amount of days figuring out who my ideal client is, and it's like, yeah, just so you cannot do the other things.
there's a question from Cethil. I feel like you get that a lot, Emelie. Like, I'm not funny.
Oh, I get that. That's one of, for sure, that's like a really big thing. um I'm sure Tony's like, oh my God, I know the answer. I've read the book. But it's like everyone is funny to an extent. Like even my own mother, has told me so many times before, she's like, I'm just not funny. And so like, I don't really think this applies to me. But then she'll turn around and like retell this story. It's just that there are different types of humor, personalities, like funny. I actually linked in here like a little quiz that I have, like, and it's kind of related to my overall brand theme, this sort of like Tex-Mex rodeo vibe. But some people are more like storytellers. Some people are like witty. Some people are very like, give me the mic and put me on a stage. So you might think that you're not funny, but it's just because our traditional you get a kind of understanding of funny is very like extroverted, kind of like everyone looking at me, and we exclude ourselves from that.
I think the appreciation of the different types of funny, like expanding our definition of what funny actually is. Like, so I grew up watching stand up back home, but I was born and raised in Russia. Russian humor, let me tell y'all, very different from North American humor. I was in shock when I started like speaking English well enough to understand English speaking stand up, because English speaking stand up was so much more blunt and below the belt. It was shocking to me, right? Like, because Russian stand up is so much more based on this like long-winded storytelling with a completely
Mm,
straight face, like deadpan, right? And then it takes them 19 minutes to bring us to the punchline, and then you're dead, right? Like, so that's what I grew up with. This is what I was used to, but it's just a different style. It's a different flavor of funny. And like, to see those questions, and Sierra was saying like feeling not the most funny person in the world in the haha funny kind of way, but there is the
mhm.
lighthearted, there is the storytelling, there is the deadpan. There's so many flavors.
Yes. Yeah, and it's interesting because that also will layer on who's attracted to you. Because I have found over time that I was doing some sort of like analysis, kind of like review of my business, and I'm like, man, I find that I continuously have clients in Canada, Australia. Like I noticed these patterns, and Kate and I were talking about this. I was like, where are my American clients? And whenever I was speaking to these people, they were like, it's because you have a very like your humor is like very much like this, not like that. And so it's interesting to think about, but that's so true. Like where you live, like regionally, or even just like culturally, or family cultures too. All of that. So love that.
Yeah. Tony, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Yeah. So
Um,
Tony asked
y-
some questions earlier we never talked about. I'm sorry, Tony.
no, first off, Emily, your job sounds like super fun. That sounds like amazing. Like that sounds like, oh, this is awesome. And Kate, thanks for that workshop on the AI stuff. Like that, just
Oh, Lauren.
it worked so awesome. So thank you for that. Really appreciate that. I think with the copy and certain humor, I think it's fun. But what I notice my peers missing a lot is the personality when it comes
Mhm.
to their website, where they're so cool in person, and then you go to their
Yes.
website and it's like who is this person? You're a CrossFitter, you're a mom, you're this and that, and over here it's just like that. So even if we don't make it funny per se, I think just
Mhm.
adding the personality of some realness in today's world
Yeah.
would help a lot of us go a long way. A lot of us go, because
Yeah.
I know I struggled with that for the first like 7 years of my career. I was just like, no, I want to be, here's my certifications, here's this, here's that. Hire me because of this, instead of saying like, hey, this is where I am. I love dogs. I just had a kid. This is
I
where
love
if I don't pick up
dogs.
the phone, like, and that stuff just resonated a lot more with my audience.
Yeah, it's almost like I tell people it's like you've got to sell yourself and people, but that's what it's about. And that's where brand voice comes in. Like we mentioned, like humor is part of brand voice, but brand voice is where all that personality is. And like even if you're just like humor out the window, like you just don't even touch on it, you can still deliver so much to that. Tony is like so on point. I agree.
And Emelie, my question was, so now that you have your copy, what do
Hmm.
you use to test a copy? Are you like reading out loud? Are you sending out
Hmm.
like test campaigns, or how do you know if your copy hit the way it's intended to hit? Like, what do you use as the kind of like the pressure test for that?
Yeah. So there are a couple layers to this, and then I'm going to ask you a question back. But first and foremost, like whatever I write, I first, like I always tell people, write draft first, like super unsexy. Like you have your messaging at the top, you're just writing the things to make sure you hit on all your points so that, structurally it makes sense. Like you're not just sitting down like, how can I be the most Emelie today? Like it's got to have some strategy, and that's where your messaging comes in. So at first, that's what I do. And then I go in and I'm not editing it to be funny, but I'm just adding that personality, or like, okay, I know that I need to communicate this sentence. So how like would I say that in my own words? So a lot of that does involve reading aloud, especially with emails, which that's the question I was going to ask you is, are you speaking to web copy, emails, anything? Because most
Uh,
things,
I think probably web copy, because I feel like
web
my
copy,
email
okay.
copy is like really personal. Like,
You've got
hey,
it
this is what
honed in.
happened. We're moving. That my social I think is the same way. It's more of like the
Yeah.
actual like the website. Like, okay, well, people, because I see like
Mm.
people go to my website and they're like, does that really say who I am, or is it more just like bells and whistles so I can sound cool to
Yeah.
myself?
Yeah, because there's a difference between intentional copy delivered with personality and fluff. And like
Mhm.
whenever I work with folks, I give them fluff budgets. It's like, listen, I don't want to see fluff. I want to see person. Like I want to see you. So yeah, one thing is it should definitely, you should be able to read it aloud. So that's another thing is like I read I read everything. But whenever it comes to like bigger projects, like writing your website copy is not just something you do like in an afternoon, right? It's serious. Like it's something that you're putting time into. I am a copywriter, but I still will hire another copywriter to be my other set of eyes and go back through it, because regardless of what you do, even like being the expert in it, it's like you're this close to it. That's why you guys are coaches, but you're working with the coach, because your business is still like you're looking at it this close, and sometimes you just miss a whole lot of stuff. So that's why it helps to have someone else asking you the 5 whys, right, Kate? So that's another thing I do. So yes, definitely like I structure, then I fill in, I read it aloud. And if it's a larger project, like a like web copy, I'll hire another copywriter to make sure that that it's like strategic, but then also it's easy to read. She understands it. It's like, all of the things there.
Did everyone hear that Emelie hires her own somebody else to look over her copywriting? Did everybody hear that? Like the all coaches need coaches thing, where like the closeness that we have to our own stuff. Like I always use the example, like you don't do brain surgery on yourself because the angles are wrong, right? Like do not do brain surgery on yourself, right? Like even if you're
Love
a brain
it.
surgeon, please do not get another brain surgeon who is good, who you trust. And I think like when we talk about messaging and personality, it almost feels like we're somewhere between these two problems. Emelie, let me know if that resonates. Because on one hand, if I'm just starting out and I actually don't know what my voice is, maybe I haven't
Mm,
written a whole lot, maybe I like don't really know how I want to show up and how I want to bring together my personality, my business, I could potentially hire someone to do all the writing, but
mm,
they don't know me, like they don't really have a sense of that voice either. No one can have a sense of the voice that doesn't exist yet. So you end up with copy that potentially sounds pretty generic, which is not super helpful. Like we're then in the sea of the saturated offers talking about, importance of protein and healthy life choices and mindset. Like kill me, right? Like we have all seen that, we've all said that, and it's very hard to stand out in that generic, maybe even fluff, I will say. But then on the other extreme, if you have a very distinct personality and a very distinct voice, I love that Emelie really closes the gap. Emelie, I said this to somebody like last year. I said, I have written myself out of copywriting assistance because now my voice is so distinctive that no one can possibly write it for me. Enter someone like you, right? Because then you can guide people to create their own assets, making them sound like themselves because they're the ones writing it.
Yeah, that's why definitely when I work with folks, it's more like I provide a lot of the structure and then sales strategies or like, sales copywriting skills. But really, I'm more of a guide and like, okay, don't rabbit trail over there. Like I tell people, you don't have to be a good writer, just a good editor. And that's another misconception too. It's like I have only ever worked with one client who had a hard time with the writing. I'm like, you guys are all amazing writers. And it's only because I think English was like her fourth language and she still did amazing. I was like, girl. So yeah, I would definitely agree. I more so provide the structure and the skills to help you use like what you've already got. But was your question about, I just want to make sure, because I know in the beginning you were kind of talking about like first starting off with finding the voice. Is that kind of what you were wanting to chat about?
Me or Tony?
Oh, you. I'm sorry, Kate.
No, so I guess somebody did ask in the comments, like, so, and I think that's what I would love for us to get into a little bit. Like, how do I get into it then? Because
Oh, like
so
how do you get started?
how do you get started and how do you maybe workshop content that doesn't sound like content everywhere else? Like my example that I give, it's like we really don't need yet another blog post that talks about 5 reasons you should eat more protein because it's
Yeah.
been written many times
Yeah.
over.
That's where you've got to find like your first mission. I always tell people is like find your POV, your point of view. And whenever I say point of view, like I mean that, again, that could probably mean so many things to different people, but it's more like what is your angle on what you're doing? Like what makes you different? Like what is the thing that other people are like, I say this. And you're saying respectfully, I say this. And not just for the, purpose of being disagreeable or a toot canoe, but just like, what's your stance? And that takes time as well as you're like working through it. But whenever you find that, I find that that's sort of like the really big, it's like the big milestone that makes the rest really easy. So it's messy action at first. It just is like, you're going to send out emails and later you're going to look back and be like, ooh, that was rough. But you got to get your reps in. Like, I wish there was a shortcut. I wish I could say, 1, 2, 3, you're going to figure it out, but you've got to get your reps in. That's what I tell all my clients. So start now, like just start now, because the sooner you can start, the better.
I actually wonder how much specificity also like overlays humor because like as I'm thinking of that protein example that I used, right? Like we can all write that blog, like all of us here could walk away and just write a blog post on why protein is important.
Yeah.
But if you happen to be a former accountant who now is a health coach working with accountants, and you could write 5 reasons protein is important for accountants.
Yeah.
And mention ledgers and spreadsheets and QuickBooks and whatever things accountants know and understand. I think that'd be pretty funny, actually, without trying to be.
Yes, no, writing with like details is a really key part of just, well, general copywriting, but also with humor for sure.
I want to pause and just see if anyone wants to pop on and ask a specific question or pop in the chat.
And I am going to pop a little pause here to get my 2 audience members out of the office. So 1 second, I'm going to go walk them over when you pop in your questions.
Yeah, so pop them in. Emelie is a mom of 4, and her most recent edition, I think, is 2 months old, not even. So she's getting a lot done with all the audience members. Anna says, I'm cringing at the thought of the emails and posts I've made in attempts to help others. Anna, I feel that. I think we're all cringing at stuff we have done.
A
right?
good thing too is that they sort of expire, if that makes sense. I mean, I will write a blog post and reflect on it a month later, and I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote that blog post. Like, and people do not see everything you put out either. Like, you've got to give yourself some grace for sure.
We have Michelle who has a question, and then Priya has a question. Michelle, go ahead.
Yes.
So my biggest one is like, I don't know if people get my humor. And sometimes
Mm.
I love to talk about poop. Like I love send me pictures of your poop, that kind of stuff. I mean,
I am
I
too. I'm like,
love
oh my
that.
gosh.
Yeah, I buy books about poop. My daughter and I read books together about poop. I mean, all of these things, but sometimes that can be too much for people. And
Mhm.
sometimes people will say, I don't think this is funny, or I don't think you should do it. So how do you own your humor and then take the criticism that people do? And when do you should you listen to the criticism and go, yeah, maybe I did take it too far. Like
Yeah.
there's this craziness of where's the balance between the two and what should I own and what should I
Mhm.
feedback.
Yeah, I think so. So much of this is very personal, and you might find that when you first start out, like, and also very true to whatever your sort of natural humor, personality, your type is. So for instance, the poop thing, right? Like I've got little kids. Okay, I'm a little kid inside. All of these things, and so like naturally, that's something like I'm sure you can relate to. It just comes up a lot, and so it started where I would just I lightly kind of included it, right? And then with some like repetition, I noticed that people started associating me with poop jokes and people started sending me poop jokes on like social media and stuff. Like people who followed me, I'm like, okay, this is becoming a thing. So you sort of just kind of like test it. But then one day I just decided, I'm going to go full send on this and apologetically just because it's very true to who I am, but I'm comfortable with that. Like, and I'm comfortable with people being like, okay, like I don't want to work with you because like potty humor isn't my thing. And you know what? That's fine because for me, it sort of speaks back to that niching thing. Those aren't the kind of people that I would be a good fit for. I have people come to me that I have even told, like, I'm not the best fit for you, but like, let me introduce you to someone who is, because like, pairing them up with someone else is going to pair me up with someone that's better for me, and the same for you. So it's a personal thing. If you feel more comfortable in the beginning, just sort of like testing it out, seeing like how far you can go that's comfortable for you and that other people, that's cool. And then decide like what is your comfort level with people not liking it. Like, do you feel like you want to be more approachable by more people? Do you like it's a personal thing. I can't really
Well, the biggest thing is
give
like,
you that.
okay, so maybe I shouldn't read all comments. Maybe I shouldn't listen to all comments, but I try to be, and this is the conflict with me trying to be really inclusive and include everybody and make everybody feel good. But if somebody talks negatively, do you just ignore it? Do you just like, how do you build a
What's
harder?
the form? What's the format? Like in a comment? Are they emailing you?
Yeah, it could be email. They could be
Mm,
telling me, they can just be, I don't see it this way and I don't know why you see it this way. And they're like trying to put their truth onto
mm,
my comedy or my lightheartedness. And I guess
mhm,
maybe it's more about me. Like I need to just figure out what I want to
mhm.
take, what I want to receive, and what I want to leave alone. And I
Yeah,
develop that hard skin.
yeah. I mean, and I'm not telling everyone, hey, go make these kind of jokes and then like get thick skin, because that's not how it is at all. Like, but it seems like you want to be able to say these things and like you feel comfortable saying them. You're just like, but it's not gonna land with everyone, but I don't want to have a reputation of like rubbing everybody the wrong way. But if
Exactly.
you notice how many people leave a comment versus how many people are like, that's really funny, see what Michelle just posted, or something of that nature. Like, what's the ratio? I bet it is so tiny. What I typically do if I receive any sort of like criticism is I recognize that a social media feed, an email list, like they get to curate what's in their feed, they get to follow me or not. And so sometimes it's just like, oh, I thought this was, unless it's offensive, genuinely, we're talking about innocent fun play. We're not talking about like being unkind or ugly. But sometimes it comes down to like, sorry, like you don't like, I'm sorry, our sense of humor is just different. And then like you can unfollow, or you know, maybe this person is a better fit for you, but just like you'll get used to sort of being able to just brush it off. It just takes some time.
I think that's true. I think I am finally old enough to appreciate my humor and want to celebrate my humor. And then now I just need to
Yeah.
critics be the
Lean
critics.
in. Yeah, because it's not this is innocent. It's not actually offensive. Like a poop joke is never it's never discriminating against someone. It's never unkind. It's never a jab. It's a poop joke. Like I know this is just our example, but
Well,
you know,
Emelie,
that's
the
what I would
reason
think about.
I actually really like humor in this context, in terms of what Michelle is asking about, is because humor and satire, they actually have rules, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things, like one of my favorite guidelines in satire, like writing, satirical writing, like Onion style, is
Yes.
punch up, don't punch down, right? So if we're
Yes.
funny, right? Like you can be funny, and as
Mm-hmm.
Emelie said, anything can be offensive. Anything can offend someone. For me, my guideline when I'm writing something is not whether I've managed to offend someone, but one of my favorite quotes is by Christopher Hitchens, who said, "May I never be offensive by accident."
Yeah, that's
I
so
like,
good.
so
That's
it's
a
the
good one.
intention behind it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also like I always like, if I'm gonna make fun, if I'm gonna be cutting and sharp, and I love that, I have a very sharp tongue, I want to make sure that I'm punching up and not
Yeah.
punching down. Emily, can you talk a little? I feel like I don't have like words to
Oh no,
explain.
that's perfect. No, you're doing great. It kind of actually reminds me though, one thing I do want to make sure I don't leave out here that I notice a whole lot, and I'm really glad you brought this up, is you know, sometimes two of the humor types tend to do this more often than the other ones, but like self-deprecation. Because like you're talking about like punching up, punching down, when it comes to like actually like punching yourself, to be careful with that. I've noticed that people who are just starting out, or they're just starting to be more of themselves, they start to it, and they think it's, oh, I'm being funny, but it's really like a deflection thing where they will start to self-deprecate. But the thing is, it tends to make them look less knowledgeable or serious. Like you just really want to be careful that if you self-deprecate, that you're already speaking from a place of quote unquote like authority. So if you're just new, if you don't have a lot of people that you're working with, or if you're making a joke about how like you don't have any clients, like or something like that, be careful of that sort of like self-punching, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's like a really great example of like the punching up and punching down is a part of my brand. Like on my website, I talk about, the whole like girl boss kind of movement. Whenever like a bunch of women started like starting their own businesses and all that sort of stuff, there were some big wigs that made it big online, and this sort of like girl boss trend started taking off. And people make jokes about, why is a girl boss, like we don't say girl, like we don't say boy bosses. And there's just there's this whole vibe around that. I make a lot of jokes against the girl boss sort of movement. And doing that, I'm not hurting anyone, because whenever you're punching towards the girl boss movement, you're really punching up to these really big people that, one, they don't give a crap about me, and then two, like it's less of a specific person and more to a group. Yes, Michelle. I'm glad you appreciated that.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. I want to
Yeah.
pass it on to Priya. Priya, you had a question. Did you want to pop on the mic?
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry, this is not related to copy, although I need lots of help with that. I have so far just done one-on-one coaching, and I am hoping to start a group coaching, and I want to do a beta to start off and, feel and see, kind of like build the thing. It's going to be a 3-month thing. Right now, my one-on-one 3-month is 1,200. And I just wanted to know how I should price my group coaching, and how should the beta be? Should the beta be less? From what I've heard is it should be less, maybe half of how much I would normally offer it for. But for that, I need to know how much I would charge for a group coaching.
Where are you getting stuck, Priya?
The figure I had in my mind on one hand, there's a thing of, they need to have skin in the game to get results. And I've had a couple of clients who I just offered free coaching. One of them did well. The other one didn't really do what she was supposed to do. So I've come to the point where, you know what, they have to pay for sure, because if they don't have skin in the game, it's a waste of my time. And I don't know, I don't want to make it so cheap that they, either think it's not worth it, or they aren't committed, because this is my testing. And, so it's important that I have clients who are committed and who are going to, do whatever. So initially I was thinking of 500. So 1,200 is for my one-on-one. And I was thinking about 500, but I'm not sure whether that isn't half of how much.
Are we
I'm not
talking about
even sure.
1,200 for the 3 months? So they're paying about 400 a month?
Yeah.
So one thing I want to point out here with pricing, pricing is always going to be very subjective and very personal, right? Like there is no such thing as too much or too little, only too much and too little to a specific person. And sometimes it's a disconnect between perceived value. It's also dependent on location, all the things. But I want to highlight that we are never completely clueless about price. And the interval that we're playing with is often tighter than we think. Because assuming you don't want to change pricing for your one-on-one immediately, you really are considering the price from $0 a month, which you don't want to do, to $400 a month, which you also don't want to do because that's your one-on-one. So your range that you're playing with, roughly speaking, is about 100 per month to 300 per month. And anywhere in there where you land, there is not going to be one number. Like we're not going to somehow do a magical formula here and say, okay, Priya, we have figured this out. It should be $279.89. Like that's the sweet spot for you. Like you could literally charge any number between 100 and 300 without like moving the other pieces. Emelie, would you add anything to that? Like just as far as pricing, how pricing goes and how like you think of pricing? Because I know you have like a one-on-one offer, you have group coaching as well.
Oh, man, when it comes to, I know you're talking about beta. I always, whenever I do beta, like when I do a program, I definitely do a beta round, and I definitely I give them a good chunk off, but I don't really have, not gonna lie to you, I don't have like a hard and fast rule. I actually have a coach myself that I use to help me kind of quote these things out, but I really like to consider the full price based on kind of what I want those month-to-month prices to be, because of course, like you want it to be accessible to people, and payment plans are way better than pay in full anyway, because the cash flow is really nice. But yeah, I like to kind of think about that too, and then also, even just like with my copy, I really like to be, you want to be kind and transparent. And so when it comes to your pricing too, like I know people are like, well, price that at $497, because you don't want it to be 500, because people's brain, people really try to like manipulate the number, but it's really nice if you just can make those numbers something whole that people can grasp onto and understand, just kind of looking at it. So that's all I have. Sorry, I'm not more of a help.
I said this morning to someone, the correct price is somewhere between I feel resentful and I feel nervous.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that.
Right? So like, don't be resentful. You could totally be nervous. It just kind of like depends on how nervous you want to be. If you want to like throw up nervous, that's probably too much. Tweak it down a bit. But somewhere in there is going to be your pricing. And you can arrive at that range pretty quickly. Like, I could do that with any coach in 5 minutes. I can give you that range between resentful and nervous. Is it $100 a month? Is it 10,000? And then we just keep shrinking it. And you arrive at a pretty narrow interval. So
I like what Tony is saying though, because I do something similarly where it's like, just pick a number and go.
Yeah.
You'll very quickly know if it's going to be a yucky fit for you or someone else. Yeah, I'm big on ship it and go.
Just do
Full
it.
send.
Anna, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Yeah, so I have a question about my parents, when they teased, they were really cutting, like to the point of like really harsh. And my dad still tries it. I'm like, just don't tease because you kind of stink at it. And I'm afraid, I think that I try to hold back some of my humor because I'm afraid I would hurt someone the way that they were hurtful.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's a great, it's very good to be self-aware of that. Because yes, I grew up in a like family culture of very like high sarcasm, like, you know, we love you because we poke fun at you, like we've got really thick skin sort of thing. So I totally understand like what you're saying. And one thing I would consider is whether it's in written or however it's packaged, just consider the delivery, the voice and the tone. Because you could say one thing, like let's just say it's being typed out and say it's like a one-liner, right? The way you format it, if you pick an emoji or not to go with it, like all of that determines the tone in which someone reads things. A big part of copywriting is using formatting to to basically kind of manipulate how people read the information. You can present words in a way that people read through it really fast, that you can put pauses in there, you can put emphasis on different words. So I know that that might be like a really kind of like a big to just put on you just now, but I would just consider the delivery. Is your heart in the right place? Are you delivering it in not an ugly kind of way? Like what are the words surrounding it too? So context matters so much. If you could give me like a specific example, I could probably help you work through that if you have something specific in mind. Because I know that some of the things that I say with my brand can come across as, when I want them to be punchy, I have to be careful that it's not going to be ugly or judgmental to people, for instance, who do hire copywriters to write their copy rather than do it themselves, or, you know, things of that nature.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know that I have done it. And I've probably blocked out all the times they did it.
Trauma.
But I guess
Mhm.
it might be something I worry about more than something that actually happens. I do lean into emojis, and I also just don't want to be that kind of person who says something and then goes, "Oh, I'm just kidding." Like I'm not putting something
Yeah.
out there and then retracting, and I don't want to play that game either. Like I just want to be straightforward.
Yeah.
What's
Like when people will say something like, I know I should say this, but, and it's like, then you shouldn't say it.
Yeah.
Because like, I love how Leah said that timing is key, because that's another thing. And then also when you're making a joke, consider what you're actually saying, because a big principle, a big part of humor is that, like, and even growing up, my mom has even told us, and like I tell this to my kids now, and it's like behind every joke is a truth. So like
Mhm.
if you're saying this about someone, like there's an underlying truth to that, a perception that you have about that person or that experience or that moment. So that's another thing to consider, is like the heart of humor is truth. So what is that truth? Because that's really the kind of the part that hurts people, is really they hear a joke and they're like, oh, I know that's a joke, but like, where did you get that angle? Where did you get that perception? There's something in you that believes that that's true. But then the opposite of that is that's what makes so many things so funny. Like one thing that comes to mind is I made this like little post. My friend and I had gone to meet at a coffee shop to work, and you guys all know how that goes when you take a buddy to go work. It's like you don't actually work. And so I wrote this post. It was like co-working, except no working. You're just talking about working. And like there was this whole thing I wrote about that. And it's like it's funny because it's true and it's a common lived experience in sort of my space. So yeah, considering the truth.
Thank you. I love that.
another rule I'm thinking from satire, Emelie, it's that like it has to be extreme enough to be understood as a joke, right?
Yes.
Like you kind of have to bend it far enough into the absurd for it to be funny. It's the difference between like me saying, I'm such a cow, ha ha ha, right? And that being a
Mm-hmm.
joke versus like, I don't know, I'm such a funky, stinky duck. It's like, okay, like that's very different. Like the
Mhm.
vibe is different because I took it into the absurd and the ridiculous. So
Over the
sometimes
top. Yeah. Being
over the top.
extreme. Yeah. And also, yeah.
So what I would love to, we have about 5 minutes. I would love for Emelie to tell us about a thing that is
Oh,
happening
yes, a
next
thing.
that I am doing. I am
Ta-da!
doing a thing, and I think you should all do the thing with me because it has to do with emails. And
Yeah. It's a
you are running
fun
a
little That's a fun little challenge. So it's called the Outlawed List Challenge. So obviously, I know you guys have things to sell, and assuming that you're probably going to, I mean, it's like prime summertime. I bet everyone is just like, help me. But with your email list, whether or not you've got, here, let me paste this right here, whether or not your email list is like alive and well or not, this is a challenge that we're going to be doing from June 17 through 21. Yeah, so 5 days. We're going to productize, I can speak to that in a second if you like, your newsletter. And then we're going to write your first couple of emails to get you started. Because a lot of people have a hard time getting their newsletter out because they get tripped over like freebies. It's like, oh my gosh, if I can't start emailing my list and growing my list until I have a freebie. And it's like, you don't really need to do that. And so we're going to productize your list. We're going to make your newsletter something that people want to willingly opt into anyway, freebie or not, and really get those first emails sent out. If you currently have an email though that you are actively using, this would also be great for you to just join in so you can have some accountability, a little bit of a community to get some emails scheduled out as well. So it'll be fun. I would love to have you guys, and it's an email based thing. So it's not like a whole hoopla, like you don't have to show up to any calls. You'll get an email for those 5 days, and then you'll also be added to an Instagram group chat that you can totally mute and just pop in when you need support or want to share your progress there. So I'd love to have you guys. It's going to be fun. Oh, and thank you for sharing my Instagram there too. But yeah, I just put the link in there. And if you have any questions, you're totally welcome to message me on Instagram as well. And yeah, that kicks off literally next week. I'm so excited.
I really like the idea of productizing the email list because I think a lot of people either like we kind of have this notion of like everyone should have an email list and I want
Yep.
an email list. I'm one of those people who's like supposed to have a freebie and don't. Like I just no, I've been writing
Supposed
my
to.
newsletter. I'm supposed to, but it's just like I don't even know what it would be. So
Mhm.
productizing the newsletter where you kind of make it recognizable enough, right? Like it almost feels like putting a bit of a face and a brand and a personality onto it. So it's not an anonymous, yet another
Join my newsletter.
my newsletter.
I'll share tips in your inbox every Tuesday.
Yes. What is
Yeah.
yours? What you like? Do you have a productized newsletter?
Yeah, so my newsletter, so part of it is on day one. We name your newsletter and then we give it a little bit of a promise. And so mine is the Copy Cantina. And then little promise is serving profitable copy strategies minus the girl boss garnish. So yeah, just a little something that you want people to look at it and go, oh, I want to join that, rather than kind of bribing them with a freebie. I do,
Yeah, so I think,
Michelle. You definitely talk about margaritas
oh yes, margaritas will be there. I can
with
provide,
my
I can attest to that.
website launch. I did like this little website. What are they called? My gosh, scavenger hunt. And then all the people who like won, their names were put in the drawing to get a frozen margarita machine. That's probably my largest business investment, honestly.
If anyone here, I know a couple of you here are getting my newsletter. If my newsletter changes its name magically in the next like couple of months and changes its promise, I'm going to blame
It's my fault.
It'd be 100% her fault. But so I hope you join. And even if you don't join, I'm thinking that the promise, the takeaway, like just from the little email piece right there, like consider if you have a newsletter, if you are in regular communication with your people already, do you have that product feel to it? Does it have a name and a promise? Because consider the difference between, hey, this is me, Susan, and I'm going to send, tips to your inbox versus, hey, I'm Susan and I have my weekly newsletter called meal planning for rebels. And every week I will send you one recipe that you will not hate making.
You
Right?
will not hate. Yeah, because people
Right.
like to know what to expect beyond like tips is very vague. It's like, okay, because they say like I don't know if this has actually changed with the economy the way it is, probably has changed, but an email address is worth about $20. So when people give you their name and their email, that's a big deal. Okay, Priya, I'll go check that out, but it should be delivering. Give it a moment. You can also check spam because that happens sometimes, but I'll look out for you.
All right, team. Well, thanks so much. Emelie, thank you so much for your time. I know I will see your butt in an email challenge. I'll see some of you there as well. And I will see a bunch of you in our next Coaches Connect.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.